So, Lynz, as I said right before we connected here, I hope I'm not too nervous and throw up. Now, I
How's it?
think that it's happened to all of us. No, probably not. But I am grateful if I don't, because, like, who wants that? This is me talking about, again, my very favorite episode. And I'm not going to gush, but I am going to just say I'm glad we get to do this. I'm glad we get to sit down and talk about it. And this is my friend Lynz. I'm Julie. And we're going to talk to you, as it says here, the anatomy of a powerful podcast in the social good space. So, Lynz, tell me more.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you're able to get through this without feeling too nervous. But the goal for this short live stream is really to dig into an episode of a podcast that's in the nonprofit or the social good space, and we're doing really two things. One is learning what the good content that is being shared inside of it that we can
Yep.
use for our own businesses and organizations. And then the other thing is looking at the structure of the podcast to learn from it to see how we might use it for a project. I'm a podcast producer. My company is Growth Network Podcasts, and Julie works with thought leaders and other folks. And likely they're going to interact with podcasts either as a guest or a
Nice.
host. And it's great to learn what the best practices are so you can step into that environment really well prepared.
I could not agree more. And so, to that end, I'm going to just briefly introduce the topic of this episode of What Good Sounds Like, where we look at this one particular episode. So, there are a lot of nonprofit podcasts out there, and some will capture our hearts and some may not, and that's perfectly okay. You got to find what really is worth the time to listen to. By the time you have 45 minutes invested in something, I hope you can walk away from it with something. And now I find that funny because I have gone back to this particular episode of how we run the full tips and tales of nonprofit success. So this is Trent Stamp from the Eisner Foundation, Julie Lacouture, who does incredible communications, fundraising, etc. And this particular episode caught me so good because it's at intersections of things that are critical to be aware of, but also seeing the new opportunities that weren't there before. In this case, the 990. Now, Lynz, do you know what a 990 is?
I do. I used to work for the Los Angeles County Bar Association, and there was a big to do with the 990 every year. Not a big enough to do, I've learned. They might have been able to make a little more of it, tell their story better.
Apparently, apparently. So, yes, and that's exactly what we find here in this episode. So, what we'll do is we'll take a moment, and there's nothing like just hearing it for yourself. So, we want you to check it out and hear
CEO of the Eisner
this.
Foundation.
So, I'm going to back it up a little bit right to the beginning so you catch it all.
Welcome to How We Run, the podcast about nonprofit success. I'm Trent Stamp, CEO of the Eisner Foundation.
And I'm Julie Lacouture, and I help nonprofits with strategy, fundraising, and digital media. This is an episode for any organization that has a complex story to tell. Kristen Palia from PS Arts shares how her organization communicates their value using evaluation and data, but also how they use the organization budget and financials to tell that story. It's really inspiring to hear how intentional they are about showing people the importance of arts education. Trent, great to see you.
It's always great to see you, Julie. Thank you.
You told me to talk to PS Arts
I did.
about, and you said, talk to them about using your 990 as a marketing document.
I did.
Do you remember this?
I do.
Okay. Tell me what you saw in their 990 as marketing. Do you remember?
Oh, and now here's where I get to cut it off before it gets good. Because one thing I'll point out too, if you haven't yet caught a episode of this particular podcast, they are very real. They really get tactical, and I love that. So, chalk that up in my things to love column for sure. So, Lynz, did you get a chance to catch any of this episode?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely. I'm hearing a little echo in your feed. Okay, now it's gone. Fun. So what I really, really liked is that the beginning of the episode is custom, right? It's not the same every time. There's like it's short, but they're telling about this episode very specifically in a way that as a listener pulls me in and makes me want to keep going. Because as somebody who listens to a lot of podcasts, I might get a little skip happy If I start to hear something that feels canned, I'll just skip forward in the feed, or I will pick up a different episode. So this one definitely kept me pulled in there, and I really like the conversation between who was it,
Trent and Julie,
and Julie.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, one thing I will point out that there were a couple things that I picked up on that I really enjoyed, and I'll get into those. But I will say your microphone got a little funny again with the. So here we have just the best of all things live audio. Now, in a podcast, I can tell you that we would be able to edit this. We would be able to go back and go, that didn't sound so good. So let's back that up and edit it. But here we're live. So that's obviously a difference. So as you're thinking about what's going to be a good fit for you, because the folks that normally join us, they are trying to deliberate. Where am I supposed to show up? And what am I supposed to do when I get there? So these are some fun things to point out. But so in this particular episode, you get to see some personality, right? You get to hear the interaction between two very, very smart people in this space, just going back and forth and not pretending they're on a platform. They're just talking and just having just some back and forth. And it's comfortable and it's easy. They make you feel like you're a friend just kind of sitting at the table listening to some people that you know have a conversation. It doesn't feel staged and it doesn't feel pretentious. It just feels like, yeah, when they did that, this, I felt this, and I can connect it over here to this. And it wasn't overly scripted. They probably had some bullet points of some key things they want to cover, but that's okay to leave it there. You don't have to script out this thing. So what do you think, Lynz?
I agree. The hosts are clearly, they know their stuff. They are talking from experience. They're listening with curiosity to the people they're interviewing, but they have an opinion and they're bringing all their experience with it. And that's pretty much why you're tuning in. You know that they come from these big organizations that you've seen or trust, and their authority is sort of baked into the show in a way that really made me feel confident that I was going to get my value for my time.
Absolutely. So I think if we're thinking about what we want folks to pick up from this, that authority piece, you don't have to sit there and read your bio, read your many accomplishments that give you the credibility to be sitting here having this discussion today. It does not pull anyone in. And if I've noticed in my own behavior, if someone starts in with this long-winded bio, that I will lose interest rather quickly and generally poke away because it's lost a tinge of professionalism for me. And that's okay. But what they do is they just say, well, as CEO of this event is, you can drop in little bits about who you are and what you bring to the table. So there's that piece for sure. And then there's also this idea that they do of establishing who is this for. We talk to CEOs and executive directors of nonprofits. That's who we talk to. Well, great. Now I know that they're going to be speaking to that audience. And that's a good thing for me because I want to know what they would say to that audience. I mean, that's an audience I care about. So that helps me know I'm supposed to stay. I'm supposed to get some great tidbits from this. So I'm not going to lose interest as quickly. So love that.
Yeah. I think, this definitely checks all the boxes. It's easy to recommend this podcast to other people because it makes you look good in sharing it because they are so good, right? And if you're intimidated to make such a thing yourself, take heart. They have not been perfect, right? Like, it is a very good podcast. I enjoyed it. I got a lot out. I hear they're just starting a new season. I'm definitely keen to check out what they offer and the guests they bring. But there's definitely from a critical eye, there are things they could be doing better for sure. But it's still a great podcast, right? And so every podcast is on this journey of like finding their voice and getting, ironing out some of the ridges that make it not quite connect with people. And so they, for example, I went to go listen on Spotify and I assumed that it would be there because it's, it's on Apple, it's on all these things. And I know as a podcaster, It's not hard. It just takes a couple of steps, but you can get your podcast listed there. And it wasn't there. And so the piece there is like, oh, they're doing a good job with where they're sharing it. And my feedback would be for them to keep expanding where it's placed so that it can continue to connect with more people. And
oh my gosh, Lynz, that was tremendous. Okay, let me just stop you there and inquire. We get this question a lot. How many platforms do I need to put my podcast on? Can't I just do one? What does it do for me to go to all of these links? So tell me more if you would.
The listeners play their podcasts. There is not a uniform place. I think Apple was the sort of go-to for a long time, and it's still prevalent, but it is not a majority necessarily leader anymore, as there are now. I mean, might it be hundreds, but certainly dozens of different types of players that all have their own. Many of them index off of Apple. So they actually have code that takes, so you submit to Apple and you're automatically in their world. And then there are other ones that make you have to submit because they only want content that has been opted into their system. And so what I would say is that there are 4 or 5 of the most common ones, including Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher. There was one more, maybe I'll think of it in a second. But these ones are sort of the most common ones in the market. And it's good practice to maybe casually look for places to add it to on a regular basis. Maybe it's like stick your head up once a season, if you're doing seasons, or every quarter, just to say, do I want to expand our visibility to a new place? And that can include sharing it to TikTok. That can include making it visible, through Facebook is now starting to put podcasts in their algorithm. So it is an ever-growing trend, but I think you can manage it by just, putting a to-do list item in your thing quarterly to say, expand our visibility by one platform.
Lynz, that sounds miserable. Why on earth? Okay, so very plainly, as you know I am, the idea of, even for me, a marketer, someone who lives and breathes on social, for me and other, like this idea is just frustrating. I want to just go to one place, Lynz. I want to go to one website, and I want to go this one, this one, this one, this one. Is there not such a thing yet?
So many of the hosts have integrated connections to some of the popular ones. And I know, like my host, I just click a button and I'm on Spotify. It literally is one button push,
Okay.
and they submit it.
That's good.
It is, we have not yet hit the point in podcasts where it is mainstream. Everyone's comfortable using it all the time at all, right? And so there's still these enclaves of user behavior that are common but not uniform, and so you have to dial your things into different user behavior situations. Look, as marketers, we want to be efficient with our marketing, but no one wants to be efficiently marketed to. Everyone wants a custom job. And so what you're trying to create is a custom experience for the listener and for the user. But even if you have to make it efficient on your end, you have to give them that feeling that it's like unique to them. And so that's this
Lynz,
putting it in place.
I hear you, but it's kind of like the idea of, I don't want to drive. I'm okay with the idea of being driven. I don't want to drive anywhere. I want to just have that. And, like we all are looking for, where's the easy button? So, but I think it's like just knowing, what will you actually attend to? If I don't like the idea of uploading podcasts to this and to that, I'm probably not going to do it. That's detrimental.
So the thing is, you're not uploading it to multiple places. You're uploading it to one place. You just have to set that thing to reach multiple places forever. So you only set it up one time for the feed, and then every show goes there.
Well, that sounds a little bit more realistic. You can see why I was like, there must be a better way. But I say that to a lot of things. So
yeah. So it isn't every episode every time, but there is still more manual work. Okay. To just get a podcast out, you can actually automate a ton of things, but the automations don't enhance interactivity, and so you actually find the custom work is what gets the most result. And I don't know that isn't, meant to stop anyone, but just to say, like, you can dial it in, but podcasters, it's like a dial in situation. You kind of think you know where you're headed, and then you have to listen to your audience. There's a feedback involved to do it well.
Absolutely. Well, then maybe that explains my one thing that I would offer for this particular podcast. And I had to look for it. But my one thing would be when I went onto my podcast platform where I'm most comfortable and get my podcasting, it's on my iPhone, my Apple Podcasts, and I open it up. And if I look at the, so when you go to your show, and what I am used to is a little bit more of a filled out experience here. I scroll down, and what I would love is a link to the guest's website. I would love links to the host's social media accounts. I would love to understand, I want more places to anchor in with you immediately. And so this is like your website for your podcast, right? It's like the most immediate landing page where people go intending to, respond with, you may have given a call to action or you may haven't, but they want to follow you. And this is a perfect opportunity to get to leverage to do that. And so, like, there's a privacy policy here, and I just think, like, yeah, I'm sure that that's something definitely important to include, but what else could we do here? It's kind of like the 990, right? Like, they want to use it as a marketing tool, and you have to catch that episode, but what could we do here?
Absolutely. I think so in the podcast industry, we call that the show notes. That is how you describe your show, both in the podcast apps, but also likely you have a website set up where you have information about your podcast. And it can be as small as just, a picture of your guest and a link to them, and then, some notes on what you did. Some people have a full transcript visible. It's really good for accessibility for people who are deaf, and journalists really like to see a full transcript. It allows them to maybe take your content for a story. And so it's basically like, if you attract a listener who's like, ooh, I want to learn more, this is the I want to learn more place, right? And so I think my critique was also, would have been here that they don't have a website specifically for their podcast. There's no place to go, and the show notes are a little light. Great content all the way around. I really
Truly
enjoyed what I got there, but it was hard to follow up on it, hard to share it, hard to pass it on to anybody.
Yeah, I would have loved to immediately post that to my Twitter. Just something super quick. But if there's not a link to their Twitter or something like that, or like, share this, click here, or here when we have a next podcast coming out, click here to go, and get a text or email when we go live. So
yeah, I think what I sense is that their organizations share it out so well, and there are probably pages within their companies that you can find, but because it's a combination of two different entities, people, maybe they didn't take the time to set up a specific page for the show, which I think would have been, as a user,
absolutely,
would have been really enjoyable.
Absolutely. And this may be us doing a bit of a stinker fuss at whoever they're working with, because I tell you, when I do podcasts, I want to work with someone. I need the help to execute and bring it forth. There's no way that I'm going to be able to execute this on top of all the other things that we're doing and have going on, because this is a lift. This really is. And so there are definitely folks out there that you can work with that will help do all of this ecosystem of stuff for you, and then make sure that you have this as something that works, that's not just adjacent to your marketing, but really plays in well. Because, like, to your point, you have a transcript, which is perfect blog and SEO. You can take the brilliant quotes that you're pulling out of this, and that's your next week's social content, if not much more. So there's so much that this could do for you, but don't make it a lift that you expect of yourself if you, number one, may not have help or you don't have capacity. I like to say, you either have time or you have money. You need to figure out which one is more realistic for you if you want to do this, and then decide who is going to be tasked with this, whether it's you, whether it's someone on your team, or someone externally. So any last thoughts before we...
Absolutely. And as somebody who does provide that sort of service here, I also heartily recommend finding somebody to work with. in identifying who on your team is going to run the project so that you really understand who the stakeholders are and everybody can be on the same page.
Yes.
And a lot of people say, oh, just start a podcast, as if it is the easiest thing in the world. And recording a conversation between two people is, in fact, very easy. But
Yes.
the other pieces that go with it are the thing that differentiate it. And as we're growing to, millions of podcasts out there, the way to, having a quality standard that you would hold in your other media assets, podcasts require that same thing. So find a team or a company or an or a person that can work with you that matches your values, and
Yes.
I think that's the way to proceed.
I love that. That can take it from just a thing that you started and then stopped to a thing that you actually can look back in a few months and go, wow, I created a full body of content that's going to stay out there and be an evergreen thing that can introduce who I am and what means a lot to our organization. And there's so much good that can come from this. So I think that's where we should start next time. So how about same
Absolutely.
time, same place?
Sounds good. See you
Wonderful.
there.
Well, thank you for your time, y'all. Have a good day.